replacing the front differential assembly in the Nissan Titan. Now this particular truck's a 2008, but the procedure is pretty much the same from years 2004 through 2015. Now with this truck, we're experiencing a little bit of leaking out of the front pinion seal. The seal is busted, but that's because there's excessive play in the pinion bearing of that differential, which we'll go over in a little bit, but I'm just taking it on a test drive. A couple things to note: front tires are brand new and the hubs are about 6 months old, so I know that those aren't the cause of the noise that we're getting. The noise starts around 20 miles an hour and speeds up in frequency as the speed of the vehicle speeds up. So I'm just gonna go ahead. I don't know how well this camera's gonna pick it up. Noise started. It's kind of a pulsing noise. It's getting pretty bad. Customers complain that the noise has gotten worse over the past 3 months. So let's go ahead and get this thing in the shop and get this thing replaced. Now, due to downtime, we went ahead and purchased a brand new differential from Nissan. This is not a remand differential. It's actually a brand new one directly from Nissan. Runs about $1,600, so it's not the cheapest option, but as far as downtime goes, it's probably the best option. Wasn't able to find a lot of manufacturers out there who offered a reman version. Larger manufacturers like Jasper do not offer them. I'll go ahead and include a link in the description of where you can purchase this part for a good price. So before we begin with this job, let's go ahead and go over the parts and tools we're going to need to get the job done. Alright, so we're going to need a 19mm socket, a 17, a 14, we're going to need a 19mm open end wrench, 17 and a 14 open end wrench, 3/8 ratchet, a 1/2 inch torque wrench, and a 1/2 inch breaker bar. Now if you purchase a remanufactured differential, you will need to purchase 2 quarts of 80/90. That's the capacity for these differentials. If you purchase a new differential like I am from Nissan, it actually comes pre-filled with the fluid. Also, I'll go ahead and put all the torque specifications and a link to where you can purchase a differential online for a pretty good price. So here we are underneath the vehicle, and as you can see, the front pinion seal is leaking, but more noticeable, this side flange, the driver's side flange, has a ton of play in it, and I'm pretty sure that's where our noise is coming from in this bearing. Now before we start removing anything, I like to just go ahead and soak down all the bolts that hold this cross member in and the differential. Differential has a total of 3 bolts, one here, one right here, and one right here. The first thing we're going to have to remove are the 4 bolts that hold this cross member in underneath the oil pan. Using our 17mm socket and wrench, we're going to go ahead and loosen these up. Now it's time to go ahead and disconnect both front drive shafts. What I'd like to do is just loosen all 6 bolts and take the shaft out of the way. You don't have to remove it completely from the vehicle on both sides. Now that all our bolts are off, we can simply just swing these to the side. Now sometimes you'll have where these hubs are actually mated really well to the differential right here. So what I like to do is just take a little chisel or a flat blade screwdriver and pry them apart with a hammer. Should pop free. We'll just swing this aside. Now that both of our front drive shafts are hanging loosely, the last thing we need to do before removing the differential bolts are the front drive shaft bolts. We need to remove all 4 of those. One thing I like to do just to keep the drive shaft from turning is just to stick another wrench in the drive shaft side, put it against the frame, and that'll allow you to remove these bolts easily. Now that everything's disconnected from the front drive shaft, it's time to remove the 3 bolts that hold it in. There's one back here by the flange, one up here by the right axle, and one up here towards the front left axle. Using a 19mm socket or wrench, you can go ahead and remove these. These are on very tight, so if you're having trouble, definitely use a torch on the back side. Watch out for rust. That's definitely going to make the job a little bit harder, but I've never had to use a torch on these, but imagine if you do live in a rusty state, you might definitely have to. And while we're removing those, I like to go ahead and place a floor jack right underneath here with a piece of wood to kind of catch it as our bolts fall out. It's a pretty heavy differential, so you definitely don't want this dropping on you. So now that we got all 3 bolts out, it's pretty much time to lower the differential. This mount right here, the front one, it likes to stick, so you may need to get a pry bar and kind of help it down. But once it's free, it pretty much just plops down. Before we drag this from underneath the vehicle, I like to just cut the vent line closest to the differential, and then we can go ahead and reattach it at that point. Now our new differential is ready to put in. If you buy this from Nissan, just like I did, they will actually come with gear lube already in them. If you buy them remanufactured, generally they don't. So now's a good time if you have a remanufactured differential to put some gear lube in there. So as far as installing this back in the vehicle, there's no really easy way to do it. What I like to do is just kind of lay underneath it, put it on my chest, and lift it up. Put 1 bolt in at a time, just securing that end of the differential. I generally start with this front here and then work my way back and then to the side with the 3rd bolt over there. Now that all our bolts are in, it's time to tighten down the hardware. We're going to torque these down to 135 foot-pounds. Now that we got the 2 fronts in, let's go ahead and tighten down the 3rd one. Once that's complete, we can go ahead and put our drive shaft bolts in. Next, let's reconnect our drive shafts. One thing that's important is that you make sure that the drive shaft is seated into the differential before you start tightening down these bolts. It's really easy to get this thing cockeyed and not have it seat correctly. Now that all the bolts are tight, it's important that we torque this down to 54 foot-pounds. What I do is I just take the cross member and a piece of wood and then kind of wedge it underneath the tire. That way the tire doesn't spin and we can get some torque on these bolts. Alright, next thing to put our cross member back in. We're going to go ahead and torque this down to 96 foot-pounds. The last thing to do before we lower the vehicle is to put the vent tube back onto the differential. So I just got done with the test drive and the vehicle is so much quieter. I'm really amazed on how much quieter the front end is and how much noise was coming from that differential. So I really hope this video helped you out. If it has, please like and subscribe. Make sure to check the links and the torque specifications in the description. If you have any comments or questions or anything you need to know, go ahead, leave them in the comment section. Thanks for watching as always, guys. See you next time.